I'm a huge fan of video games, so much of a fan that I want more of it. Not just more video game sequels, but also have them in books, comic books, television shows, and especially movie adaptations as well. There are plenty of video games that were popular enough to get themselves an adaptation into the Hollywood blockbuster, and in response to both fans of the video game series and moviegoers who never played a video game in their life, has made a bold statement that video game adaptations are the worst idea ever. There is no argument that there are some movies that are based on a video game that are so god-awful, but just saying that all of them are terrible is something that I strongly disagree on. To me, saying that all video game adaptations are awful is a misconception. It baffles me to see that there are people out there that have a bias that movies and video games should stay in their own media. Well, these are the types of people that hate video game movies. A, they're too much of a fan of the game that they hate any changes being made from its source material. B, they take movies way too seriously and they hate anything that isn't Academy Award winning material. C, they only seen video game movies that have a bad story from the video game series, and it shows that the only reason why the series is even good is because of the gameplay. Or D, people just loves movies and hate video games, or the other way around. I'm not any of those individuals who think that way. I give both movies and games a chance before I give out my personal opinion on them, and you know what? Some of the games that are adapted to films aren't really as bad as what everybody claims it to be. So I was able to make a top 10 best video game movies of all time. Remember, these are my opinions, so if you disagree, we can discuss about it in the forums in itstailtime.net. Till then, let's get on with the list. Starting at number 10, Doom. Let's be honest here. There was no story or characters in the video game series. It was just shooting demons and zombies in Mars that were coming out of the gates of hell. It was just the gameplay of Doom that made it both one of the most famous and most controversial games of all time. And I guess that I'm thankful enough that the movie of Doom was able to give us a typical action story and casted my favorite professional wrestler of all time, The Rock, into this film. Not only because he looks like the skinny version of the nameless Space Marine or the Doom guy, but because he was the fan of the original game, and it shows because he knows what is the best weapon of the video game series.
You seem very comfortable with weapons. Especially, let's talk about it, the big gun.
That's what I'm talking about.
We can say the big gun.
Gun. Everybody stand by, force gun. That, the big gun, yeah.
So you have to give him some credit. But seriously, saying that this movie is nothing like the games is just wrong. It's set in Mars, and it has tons of demons and demonic creatures that gets blown up by Space Marines. What I find most unique about the Doom movie was the first-person shooter scenes where it's trying to be so close to its source material. I admit that it was gimmicky for the cinematography to be in first person, trying to be like the game, but I enjoyed it, and glad it wasn't throughout the entire film. But the only reason why this movie is so low in this list is because it wasn't that great of a film. The biggest problem for me is that it's a little too dark for my taste. I could hardly care for the subplots, and the film didn't go to hell like we expected. At number 9, Street Fighter, the movie. Yes, I'm talking about the 1994 movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia. I know that most of you people are thinking that this movie should be in the worst list rather than the best list because it's not taken too seriously. It's not really true to its source material with Street Fighter 2, and the casting is all wrong. Here's the thing, the movie is based on a fighting game, and fighting games hardly have a decent plot. It's only known for its gameplay, which is all about one-on-one fights. And with that being said, it's a better idea for it to be a video game rather than a movie. But Street Fighter the movie was trying to appeal to fans at the time who were young gamers who doesn't appreciate great acting, script, and cinematography, but rather focusing too much on the action and comic relief. And time isn't too kind with this movie. So why is this movie in the list? It's so bad that it's good. I mean, this movie is just so funny, and it's kind of sad that there are people who actually decide to watch this movie expecting it to be taken seriously. I know the casting is all wrong, having Van Damme as Guile, a Samoan to play as Honda, Ryu and Ken playing as dumbasses rather than lead characters, and it didn't offer any decent special effects, but you can't deny that Connie Minogue as Cammy, and Ming-Na Wen as Chun-Li, and Raul Julia as M. Bisons were good picks for casting as those Street Fighter characters, even if they didn't make makeup and outfits 100% great. I mean, sure, this movie was the typical save the world type of story, but I would rather put this in the list rather than having the Street Fighter II the animated movie, which was so slow, didn't have a story, and the only redeeming quality was Chun-Li in the shower, and Street Fighter The Legend of Chun-Li, which was a movie that should have never been made. But just to let you guys know that Street Fighter the movie is the only so bad that it's good kind of movie that made it to this list, because if there were more of those so bad it's so good type of films in this list, then nobody would take this list seriously. At number 8, Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Even though I'm no longer a Tomb Raider fan, I have to admit that the film was really true to its source material. All the video games were just generic action-adventure with a chick with great sex appeal trying not to be characterized as an Indiana Jones knockoff. Despite the similarities that Lara Croft gets as an Indiana Jones for video games, there are plenty of top-notch action that you don't see in ordinary action flicks, such as creatures like dinosaurs and robots that Lara Croft fights, and so much more that has already been seen in other Indiana Jones knockoffs. But for Lara Croft Tomb Raider's case, this was definitely entertaining. I think Angelina Jolie was a great pick as Lara Croft, mainly because she's in shape, has great sex appeal, and does action sequences better than other ordinary actresses in the movie industry. I mean, ever since this movie was released, when anybody mentions Lara Croft or Tomb Raider, I immediately think of Angelina Jolie because of how iconic and memorable she played as the most popular video game heroine. Mainly all this movie is just Lara Croft doing what she's most known for. Nothing more I can say about the action scenes, except they are very entertaining to watch. Heck, even Roger Ebert, the guy who said that Die Hard was bad, surprisingly liked both of the Tomb Raider movies.
I like this movie.
You did not
Yes,
like
it
this
is
movie.
my job.
You are
It
not
is my
recommending
job,
this movie.
please.
You're not telling me.
I'm talking now.
It's kind of unfortunate that there's no more Tomb Raider movies because I would really like to see Angelina Jolie to be casted as Lara Croft one more time. Even though I'm no longer a Tomb Raider fan because of the repetitive find the treasure type of adventure and uninteresting gameplay, but I will have to admit that I like the Tomb Raider movies much more than the Tomb Raider video games. At number 7, Resident Evil. The Resident Evil movie made it to the list because of its atmosphere. And believe it or not, this is the one movie that got me into the zombie movie genre. This zombie movie was at first the most mysterious and unpredictable compared to pretty much all the other zombie flicks that has been made before it. And it delivered much more than what was expected, except if you already were predicting that there's going to be a zombie invasion at the end of the film. Without getting to spoilers, the end of the film has offered one of the best cliffhangers I've ever seen in a movie. Yes, I know that this film has no characters that was from the games, but let's be honest here. There is no real main character of the series. I mean, look at every RE game. Every one of them has a different main character, and at times a very different cast. So why can't Alice be our main character in the movie series? Okay, I have to admit that Alice's character in the sequels turned her into a typical non-stop badass female character, but in the first RE film, she was vulnerable, which helps the atmosphere to be horrific at least. If you're expecting characters from the games to make it to the big screen, I recommend watching the sequels instead. As thrilling and unpredictable the movie was at first viewing, the only reason why this movie isn't higher at this list is because the first half of the movie was very slow and just kept giving us non-stop jump scares. Other than that, check this movie series out. It basically expands the Resident Evil universe, which I do appreciate as a fan of the game series. Man, there has been so many countless Pokemon films, and many of them are ups and downs for me. But out of all of them to pick, I have to say number 6 is Pokemon 3, The Spell of the Unknown. What this film did was to take a legendary Pokemon, the Unknown, and Entei, and put them in a plot that goes beyond the standards of a Pokemon plot. Pokemon 3 is an epic fairy tale. It's about a little girl named Molly and her father, an archaeologist, searching for the unknown. But one day he ended up in the realm of the unknown. Assuming that her father is gone forever, Molly took her book, which was left from her father, and wished for her father's return. Thus the unknown was released, and in return for their freedom, they granted her wish. Rather than giving her father back, they replaced him with Entei. Molly believed Entei was her father because of the stories and games her father shared together. Thus, the more happy she becomes and the more wishes she makes, the more powerful the unknown gets, causing the whole mansion to be covered in crystal glacier, and keeps expanding the glaciers, which would cause the world to destroy. And I know what you're thinking. So what does this have to do with Pokemon? Later, our main characters, Ash, Brock, Misty, and Pikachu, enters the movie to rescue Molly and Ash's mom, who assumed that Ash's mother was her own mother. I gotta say that out of all the Pokemon films, this was the most epic for me, because Entei was just a badass. And to finally put Charizard in his full potential was all else epic. Not to mention the focus on Mommy's feelings, which was indeed emotional. I mean, it was really emotional to see how lonely a little girl can be without the love and care for a family because her father was all that she had. You could see the rage and the frustration she needs for a family, and of which pulls the audience into the world she creates with the help of the unknown. What's also great about this film is that out of all the Pokemon films, this one you don't have to know all the Pokemon to understand what's going on, unlike the first movie. I used to believe that Pokemon 2000 was the best because it was so much better than the awfulness of the first movie, but in comparison to the third film, 2000 was after all a typical save the world story that has been done a million times, even though that film had the best soundtrack of the whole movie series. But with all the great things being said about this movie, why is Pokemon 3 only at number 6, you may ask? Well, it's the same fucking problem with all the other movies, not to mention the whole entire franchise. Number 1, must they always have to put in the 20-minute short film of Pikachu in the very beginning? It's absolutely unnecessary, not to mention uninteresting. Number 2, Pokemon just saying their names as their own dialogue. Number 3, hardly any character development with the main characters. And number 4, fucking Team Rocket that always ruined the epicness of every film. Seriously, fuck these faggots. With that being said, I love the plot of Pokemon 3, and I wish somebody could just rip off the story of Pokemon 3 and do a better job because I want to like it more. You know, there's a lot of filmmakers that likes to rip stories off and put it into the big screen, so why can't anyone do the same with Pokemon 3 just like they did with Ferngully to make Avatar? At number 5, Resident Evil Apocalypse. That's right, 2 video game movies from the same video game franchise in one list. I myself, as a fan of the video games and the movie series, proudly say that the second Resident Evil movie is my favorite out of the bunch. Everybody's problem with the first one was that there weren't familiar characters from the series. Fortunately, the second one had characters from the original, and I'm glad that Jill Valentine made it to the big screen and did an excellent job on her makeup and kinda did a great job with her character, despite the mediocre acting. The reason why I like Apocalypse the best is because Resident Evil Nemesis is my favorite game in the whole Resident Evil series. I just love how chaotic the whole Raccoon City is with the zombie invasion, and out of nowhere Nemesis shows up and surprises you, just like the games. I especially love the thrill of helping all the unharmed civilians out of safety and the panic to escape out of the city before a nuclear detonation by, surprise surprise, Umbrella. I do admit that the biggest flaw of Apocalypse, other than the confusing parts, is that they made Alice, the main character of the film series, too much of an action hero, and the action sequences going on in the entire film made the horror atmosphere diminish at a great degree. So if you really want horror in your Resident Evil films, I recommend watching the first one, which is at my number 7 pick. But if you're like me who likes zombie invasions from the games, Apocalypse was just made for you, regardless of how over the top and ridiculous some scenes are that felt like a guilty pleasure. The first Resident Evil movie tried a lot of things, but should only concentrated on one. Apocalypse, however, did a better job and was highly entertaining, and compared to other video game movies, this is damn good. At number 4, Sonic the Hedgehog the movie. I remember watching this film as a kid. I really did admire the epic story going on in this Sonic's adaptation. It had a decent plot, well-made animation, and offered a really great build-up all the way to the end. The first half of the film was when Robotnik tricked Sonic and Tails in coming to his kingdom, Robotropolis, to destroy him with his Metal Robotnik. Then in the second half, it was battling Metal Sonic. Up when this film was made, we only got a chance to see Metal Sonic and Sonic CD and Sonic Fighters, and it was just pure fan service to see these two characters to go at it at each other right in the big screen. Heck, it was much more exciting than seeing Shadow and Sonic fight each other all the time nowadays. It was also great to have Tails and Knuckles to make it to the big screen to help Sonic out. But what really steals the show for me is the comedy. I mean, you wouldn't believe how Sonic treats Tails in this film, and not to mention these really wacky one-liners.
You might know everything I'm going to do, but that's not going to help you, since I know everything you're going to do. Strange, isn't it?
I showed this film to many of my friends, and not one of them could hold their laughter. The action and comedy springs back and forth and is extremely consistent with changing the tone in each scene. And to put a cherry on top is the epic soundtrack that brings me back to the 90s. Boy, just watching this film never fails to amuse me. At number 3, Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. I never thought that a Prince of Persia game could do so well into a movie, and in video game movie standards, this has to be very high in this list for me. The movie was an adventurous thrill ride that almost felt like Pirates in the Caribbean in a certain way. In fact, the producers of the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy were working on this film. The production value was very good. The storyline may not be as good as the game it was based on, but at least it has given us a different ending. And most of all, I can't believe Disney has took this video game adaptation very seriously, despite the fact that this movie had a comedic tone. When I checked out many reviews on this movie, everybody made the same nitpick saying that the Prince of Persia is not Persian, which is kinda ironic to see that the first game on the Apple II, the Prince of Persia, was in fact a white man. The movie incorporated acrobats very well, the CGI special effects were great, and its time-stopping scenes were very well done, which played a big part of the story. I'm not going to say any more about the film because it came out a few years ago, but my advice when you watch this film, stop taking movies so seriously and just enjoy this movie. A great video game movie. But the reason why I put Prince of Persia overall at number 3 that high in this list is because it was an exciting thrill ride from beginning to end that gave me a great impression. And I hope that Jordan Mechner, the creator of the series, is proud of how much the movie brings justice to the series. At number 2, to my knowledge, anyone who says anything good about video game adaptations into movies often say that this is the best one. Of course, it's not like the video games where it's the most violent thing that you'll ever see, because if the film wasn't PG-13, then it would be less successful because fans of the games were a young audience at the time when the film was released in theaters. But other than going on to the debate if this movie should have been PG-13 or R, I have to say it does share the same flaws as Street Fighter the movie, because like every fighting game adapted to a movie, you'll be missing a lot of characters, and not all of them will play a big part or have enough screen time if you were expecting your favorite character to make a great scene in the film. But in reality, there are a lot more memorable quotes and scenes in Mortal Kombat that I'm surprised that fans of the series actually say that this film did justice to the games. I mean, you can't deny how awesome the fight between Scorpion and Johnny Cage was. Mortal Kombat was just a kung fu fantasy action flick that was very entertaining to watch. Unlike Street Fighter, the casting for each character, despite not looking exactly as the same as the counterparts, the cast were all good picks. And unlike the sequel, the special effects were great to watch, especially Goro, which really shocked the hell out of me when the first time I saw it in live action. Granted, the special effects didn't age well, but what makes it worthwhile is just the action, comedy, and the one-liners. Clearly, nothing more can be said that has already been said about this movie, but to say that this is the best video game movie of all time is kind of being too generous, because the script wasn't well written, the story was cliched, and it's more of an entertaining type of movie rather than a great film. Nevertheless, the film was a great fan service to the Mortal Kombat franchise, and I never regret watching it again and again. And finally, the number 1 greatest video game movie of all time is... Silent Hill. One main reason why this film is at the top of my list as the best video game movie is because it has the best acting, the best special effects, and the best plot that I've ever seen in a video game movie. This is one of the best things that ever happened between the relationship between video games and movies, because it worked so well. It was taken so seriously, and the production value behind this film was just so great. It basically took the story from the first Silent Hill game for the first half of the film, and the rest, they did something differently that I can't believe it worked so well. I'm glad that this film did a lot of different things that has never been seen in the video game franchise, just so they can make a different experience once watching this film. If they just simply did the exact same story that was seen from the first game, then there's nothing to be excited about, because if we already know the ending of the game, then what's so special with a predictable ending if there weren't any changes in the movie? So to me, the changes that have been done in this film felt necessary. And it's kind of sad to see that there are fans of the Silent Hill games that hated this movie because of the changes they've made. Specifically, the change of the main character, who wasn't Harry Mason, but instead Rose da Silva, played by Rada Mitchell, and some familiar characters that got killed off of the story, without getting into spoiler territory. The problem with those fans is that they're too much of the fan of the games that they don't accept anything that differentiates the source material. I mean, nothing bothered me except the disturbing imagery that caught my full attention. The horror, the scares, the atmosphere was definitely an experience that I won't forget after first watching this film. It's one of those horror movies that is so disturbing that I can't watch by myself ever again. The reason why I love Silent Hill the movie so much is that it reminded me of the first time I was introduced to the game series for the Sony PlayStation back in 1999, and it reminded me of why I was a big fan to begin with. So many things from the Silent Hill game series made it to this movie. The Pyramid Head, the midget monsters, the disfigured creatures, the haunted nurses, and so many more that was so well executed right on the big screen. Really, I can tell that the people that worked on this film were fans of the games. This truly is the film that gives me faith on both the video game movies and the movie licensed video games to be great. And I don't wait for a new video game movie to do a much better job than this movie in adapting another video game into a movie. Because believe me, as great as Silent Hill the movie was, you can actually get better than this. Because if novels and comic books can do a great adaptations to video games, why can't we have better video game movies? Would a BioShock movie dominate the Silent Hill movie? Would an Uncharted film be better? Would a Halo film be a classic? Or would a Metal Gear Solid movie be Academy Award winning material? We really don't know how much better the future of video games movies will be, but it is expected to see how much worse if we don't have better directors, actors, and writers to make better video game movies to be as good, if not better, than Silent Hill the movie. So that wraps up my top 10 favorite video game movies. Be sure to check these films out if you haven't seen them already, and stay tuned for my next video game review.